My other favorite question is, why do those abused by narcissists engage in self-harm? Listen closely. Self-harm is a deeply troubling manifestation of psychological distress, often stemming from a multitude of complex factors. To answer the question, here are 10 surprising factors that shed light on why individuals who have experienced narcissistic abuse may turn to self-harm. Are you ready? Let's talk about number 1, feeling guilt and shame over what happened. Feeling guilt and shame over what happened is a heavy burden many survivors of narcissistic abuse carry. It's like a weight on their shoulders, dragging them down. These toxic emotions can overwhelm them, making them feel trapped with no way out. As a result, some individuals turn to self-harm as a form of punishment or release. It's like they're trying to cope with the pain in the only way they know how. Enduring narcissistic abuse can leave deep scars, both visible and invisible. It's like being trapped in a maze of manipulation and deceit with no clear path to escape. Self-harm becomes a way to navigate through this maze, even though it only leads to more pain. It's a desperate cry for help, a silent scream that often goes unheard. The scars left behind by self-harm are not just physical. They're reminders of the emotional turmoil within. Breaking free from the cycle of self-harm requires understanding and support from those around them. It's like untangling a knot, one thread at a time, until the burden becomes lighter. Healing from narcissistic abuse is a journey filled with twists and turns, but it's a journey worth taking. With patience and compassion, survivors can reclaim their sense of self-worth and rebuild their lives. Can you relate to this next one? Literally can't feel anything inside. It's like being numb to the world around you. Enduring prolonged emotional manipulation and gaslighting can strip away one's ability to recognize one's own emotions. It's like being lost in a fog, unable to see clearly. As a result, some individuals turn to self-harm in a desperate attempt to feel something, anything at all. It's like grasping at straws in the darkness, hoping to find a glimmer of light. Self-harm becomes a way to break through the emotional numbness and reclaim a sense of control. It's a temporary relief from the overwhelming void within. But beneath the surface, the pain still lingers, waiting to resurface. Healing from this emotional numbness requires gentle care and patience. It's like coaxing a dormant flower to bloom again, nurturing it with love and understanding. With time and support, survivors can learn to reconnect with their emotions and rediscover the beauty of feeling alive. Number 3, it is a coping mechanism. In the absence of healthy coping mechanisms, self-harm can become a default strategy for managing overwhelming emotions. It's like a safety net, albeit a harmful one, in a world where everything feels out of control. Survivors of narcissistic abuse often feel like they're drowning in a sea of trauma and pain. Self-harm becomes a lifeline, a temporary escape from the suffocating weight of their experiences. But like a band-aid on a deep wound, it only offers temporary relief. Healing from narcissistic abuse requires replacing self-destructive coping mechanisms with healthier alternatives. It's like learning to walk again after being confined to a wheelchair. With guidance and support, survivors can discover new ways to navigate through their emotions and reclaim their lives. Next, we will talk about self-worth. Seeking validation. Seeking validation becomes a desperate need when your experiences are constantly dismissed. Narcissistic abusers excel at invalidating their victims' emotions, making them feel invisible. It's like shouting into the void, with no one to hear or understand. In this isolation, self-harm may emerge as a subconscious plea for acknowledgement of their pain. It's like a silent scream for someone to finally see the depth of their suffering. However, validation from external sources can only provide temporary relief. True healing comes from within, from learning to validate one's own experiences and emotions. It's like finding a beacon of light in the darkness, guiding you towards self-acceptance and empowerment. With time and self-reflection, survivors can break free from the cycle of seeking validation externally and find the strength to validate themselves. Number 5, reenactment of trauma. Reenacting trauma can feel like being trapped in a never-ending loop of pain. For some survivors, self-harm becomes a disturbing echo of the abuse they endured. It's like replaying a nightmare over and over again, unable to break free from its grip. These self-destructive behaviors perpetuate a cycle of victimization, keeping them trapped in a pattern of harm. It's like being stuck in quicksand, sinking deeper with every struggle. Despite the pain it causes, self-harm offers a twisted sense of familiarity and control. It's like a warped form of comfort in the midst of chaos. But breaking free from this cycle requires confronting the underlying trauma and learning healthier coping mechanisms. It's like finding a way out of the labyrinth, one step at a time, towards healing and liberation. With support and resilience, survivors can rewrite their stories and reclaim their power. Number 6. Control over pain. In the face of narcissistic abuse, where powerlessness reigns supreme, self-inflicted pain can paradoxically offer a semblance of control. It's like grasping onto a lifeline in the midst of a storm, however fragile it may be. By inflicting pain upon themselves, individuals reclaim a sense of agency over their own suffering. It's a defiant act against the abuser's attempts to dominate and manipulate. Yet beneath the illusion of control lies a deeper vulnerability, a yearning for genuine empowerment. Healing from narcissistic abuse requires unraveling this complex dynamic and finding healthier ways to assert control. It's like untangling knots in a rope, slowly but steadily, until freedom is within reach. With support and self-awareness, survivors can break free from the cycle of pain and reclaim their autonomy. What do you think about this next one? Distorted self-image. A distorted self-image can feel like looking into a shattered mirror, where every reflection is fragmented and distorted. Narcissistic abuse has a way of chipping away at one's self-esteem, leaving behind a jumbled mess of doubts and insecurities. It's like being trapped in a hall of mirrors, unable to find a clear reflection of who you truly are. In this confusing maze, self-harm can become a distorted means of reaffirming one's existence. It's like etching your identity onto your skin, hoping to make it more tangible, more real. But the scars left behind only serve as a painful reminder of the damage inflicted by the abuser. Healing from narcissistic abuse requires piecing together the shattered fragments of self-worth and self-identity. It's like putting together a puzzle, slowly but surely, until the picture becomes whole again. With patience and self-compassion, survivors can learn to see themselves clearly beyond the distorted lens of abuse. Number 8. Escape from emotional numbness. The physical pain induced by self-harm can temporarily break through emotional numbness, offering a fleeting sense of relief and aliveness amidst inner turmoil. Number 9. And this is common for most victims. Want to communicate the unspoken pain. Wanting to communicate the unspoken pain is like having a weight on your chest that you can't lift alone. Survivors of narcissistic abuse often find themselves drowning in a sea of emotions too complex to articulate with words. It's like trying to shout in a soundproof room where no one can hear your cries. In these moments of desperation, self-harm can become a silent language, a way to express the depth of inner anguish that words fail to convey. It's like leaving breadcrumbs of pain for others to follow, hoping they'll understand the silent screams for help. Yet behind every self-inflicted wound lies an unmet emotional need, a longing for validation and understanding. Healing from narcissistic abuse requires breaking through this barrier of silence and finding healthier ways to communicate one's pain. It's like learning a new language, one that speaks of resilience and self-compassion. With support and empathy, survivors can find their voice again and rewrite the narrative of their pain. And lastly, lingering trauma bonds. Despite the toxicity of the relationship, survivors of narcissistic abuse often develop deep-seated trauma bonds with their abusers. Self-harm may be a manifestation of the internal conflict between breaking free from the abuser and longing for the perceived safety of the familiar, albeit harmful, connection. Comment down what topics you want us to talk about next. Show your support and love by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. Until next time, watch another informative video over here.